"Daddy, why won't the girls laugh anymore?" The innocent query echoed through the cavernous marble hallway, a stark reminder of the joy that had once filled the Herrera mansion. Luis Herrera, a titan of Spanish industry, a billionaire accustomed to the vibrant hum of success, stepped into his home and found it cloaked in an unbearable silence. Just hours before, he'd been soaring above the world, returning from a deal in Dubai, blissfully unaware that his reality had shattered. His beloved wife, Camila, was gone, taken swiftly and cruelly. Their 5-year-old twin daughters, Lucia and Marisol, once fountains of infectious laughter, had retreated into a silent, unreachable world. The scene in their bedroom was etched forever in his memory. He found them curled together on their large, ornate bed, two frightened birds huddled against the storm. Their tiny hands clutched each other with such ferocity that their knuckles shone white against their skin. He knelt beside them, his voice cracking with grief and desperation, begging for a sign, a word, a flicker of recognition that would prove they were still with him. But the girls remained fixed, their eyes staring blankly ahead, as if their voices had been buried alongside their mother. The days that followed were a blur of anguish. Desperation became Luis's constant companion, an unwelcome shadow that stretched with him across the sunlit rooms. He summoned Dr. Alba Mendez, Spain's most respected neurologist, an old family friend whose reputation for brilliance was matched only by her unwavering confidence. She arrived with an entourage of specialists, flown in from across the country, and the mansion transformed into a sterile clinic. They conducted a battery of tests, scans, evaluations, neurological assessments, their every move underscored by Luis's frantic hope. Then came the verdict, delivered with the cold, clinical precision that characterized Dr. Mendez. It was a pronouncement that would shatter Luis's world anew. "The trauma is irreversible, Luis," she said softly, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder, a gesture that offered little comfort. "Your daughters will never speak again. What they have lost, it's permanent." The word never echoed in his mind, a death knell to the dreams he held for his children. In the weeks that followed, his mansion transformed into a sterile, private institution. Medical machines hummed through the long nights, a mechanical symphony of failing hope. Therapists rotated through the halls, their faces etched with professional concern, their efforts yielding nothing. Medications, prescribed with meticulous precision, lined up like soldiers in a losing battle. Luis poured his fortune into treatments, chasing any whisper of a miracle that might coax sound back into his daughter's fragile worlds. But Lucia and Marisol remained locked in their silence, their childhood fading like a photograph left too long in the sun, their vibrant personalities muted to shades of gray. Luis's life became a monotonous cycle of sleepless nights and hollow days, each sunrise bringing a fresh wave of despair. Then, one ordinary morning, everything shifted, almost imperceptibly. Amina Clark walked into the mansion. She arrived with nothing but a worn backpack, soft eyes that held untold stories, and a quiet calmness that stood in stark contrast to the palpable tension that gripped the house. She had been hired simply to help with the cleaning, a temporary solution to fill a gaping void. Luis barely glanced at her, handing her the schedule with a dismissive gesture before retreating to his office, his mind consumed by his daughter's plight. But Amina noticed the twins immediately. Two silent little shadows perched on the carpet, surrounded by dolls, their eyes distant, their bodies rigid with unspoken grief. She recognized that look. It was a haunting echo of the children she had cared for at the hospital in Barcelona, long before her life had unraveled, long before the devastating accusation that had destroyed her career, her license, and her reputation. What her resume didn't reveal, what she no longer dared to voice, was that she had once been a brilliant and compassionate nurse. What it also concealed was the chilling fact that Dr. Alba Mendez was the very person who had signed the report that had irrevocably ruined her life. The fact she was as yet unaware of. Fate, it seemed, possessed a cruel sense of poetry. As she dusted the bookshelves, Amina found herself humming a lullaby, a melody her grandmother had sung during her own childhood. It was soft, low, and warm, like a blanket knitted from cherished memories. And then, something extraordinary happened. Lucia lifted her head, her gaze drawn to the sound. Marisol stopped moving her doll, her small body suddenly still. Their eyes followed Amina, wide and attentive, as if a thread of music had reached a place untouched by doctors, untouched by fear. Luis, passing through the corridor, froze. For months, not a single sound, not even meticulously crafted music therapy, had stirred the girls from their silent world. Yet here they were, watching, listening intently in the quiet that followed the lullaby. Something small, but undeniably profound, had shifted in the house. For the first time since Camila's death, a fragile tendril of hope cracked the oppressive silence. From that day forward, the girls began to follow Amina, like two timid but intensely curious sparrows. They never spoke, never reached out to touch her, but they watched her every move, their eyes conveying a silent longing. And Amina, without consciously intending to, began to weave herself into the rhythm of their days. She sang while folding linens, her voice barely a whisper. She narrated silly stories while sweeping the vast marble floors, her words laced with gentle humor. She even pretended to have full conversations with the potted plants, just to elicit a blink of confusion from the twins, a flicker of amusement that caused tiny smiles to tug at the corners of their lips. In the evenings, when the mansion sank into its heavy hush, she hummed soft melodies that seemed to stitch warmth back into the very walls. Luis found himself coming home earlier each day, often hiding in doorways, just to witness what no specialist had been able to achieve in months: the return of light to his daughter's eyes. It terrified him that something so simple, so inherently human, was succeeding where vast fortunes and cutting-edge medicine had failed. Amina wasn't a therapist. She wasn't a doctor. She was someone he didn't understand, and that, more than anything, scared him. 3 months passed, and Amina had become an integral part of the house's heartbeat, a quiet but essential presence. The twins followed her everywhere, two small shadows with matching braids, their silence no longer empty, but filled with a sense of searching, of curiosity. Yet Amina never pressured them, never pushed them to speak. She simply stayed close, radiating warmth and unwavering steadiness, the kind of presence that grief couldn't easily destroy. Then came the afternoon that felt like pure magic. Luis arrived home early, drawn by an unusual quiet that permeated the upper floors, a hush filled not with emptiness, but with anticipation. He climbed the stairs, guided by the faint sound of giggles he almost dared to believe he was imagining. When he opened the door to the twins' room, he found them dressed in tiny white doctor coats, plastic stethoscopes bouncing against their chests. Amina was lying dramatically on a mattress, pretending to be gravely ill. And then, like a miracle whispered into existence, Lucia spoke. "Mama, you need your medicine," she said softly, her voice hesitant but clear. "Yes, Mama, or you won't get better," Marisol added, echoing her sister's words. Luis's heart shattered and then reformed, stronger than before. His daughters were speaking. Amina jolted upright the moment she saw Luis standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with disbelief, his breath ragged, tears already streaming down his face. She opened her mouth to offer an explanation, to apologize for overstepping, but no words came. She had never intended to cross a line. The girls had simply handed her the toy stethoscope and asked her to play hospital, and she couldn't bear to deny them even a moment of joy. But Luis didn't speak. He crossed the room in 2 trembling steps and dropped to his knees before his daughters. His hands hovered in the air, as if he were afraid that touching them would break the fragile spell. "Melizos, I can hear you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Lucia blinked, her brow furrowed in concern. "Puppy, why are you crying?" "Because," his breath hitched, "because I'm happy. So happy." For the first time in 6 months, he held both girls in his arms, and felt their small bodies vibrate with life, not with fear. Amina stood frozen, one hand pressed to her chest, watching the reunion she had never dared to hope for. That night, Luis called Dr. Alba Mendez, expecting her to share in his joy, to celebrate this extraordinary breakthrough. But instead of joy, he was met with a chilling disapproval. "They called her Mama, Luis?" she repeated sharply. "That's a psychological red flag. That woman is confusing them." "What are you talking about, Alba?" "They spoke temporarily, yes, but they spoke. This is dangerous." Her voice dropped, taking on a conspiratorial tone. "Do you even know who she is? Where she came from? You didn't verify her past, did you?" Luis felt the ground shift beneath him. When Alba revealed Amina's history, her lost license, the negligence accusation, the patient's death, everything inside him recoiled in horror. That night, he confronted Amina, his voice cold, controlled, and laced with barely suppressed fear. "Is it true? Were you a nurse? Did you hide that from me?" Amina's hands trembled as she nodded, her eyes filled with pain. "I tried to tell you, but no one would hire me otherwise." "Get out," he whispered, the words like shards of ice. "Leave this house." And just like that, the light that Amina had brought into the mansion vanished, leaving behind a chilling darkness. Amina didn't beg, didn't argue. She simply lowered her eyes, gathered her worn backpack, and walked out into the cold Madrid night. The door closed behind her with a soft click, a sound far too insignificant for the enormity of what it had taken from the house. At the top of the stairs, Lucia and Marisol watched her leave, their lips trembling, their eyes rimmed with tears. And when the echo of Amina's footsteps faded, so did something inside them. By morning, the twins had slipped back into complete silence. No words, no laughter, not even the shy smiles that Amina had so painstakingly coaxed from the depths of their grief. Luis tried to pretend that everything was under control. He hired a new housekeeper, reinstated the strict therapy schedule, and allowed Alba full access to the girls' care once more. But the house froze again, gripped by an even more profound silence than before. The twins refused food, refused sleep, refused even to lift their heads when he entered the room. They sat curled together on the bed, staring blankly at the doorway, waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. One sleepless night, driven by a pain he could no longer outrun, Luis was searching through his office drawers for a contract when he stumbled upon a medical report he didn't remember receiving. It was an old, folded document buried beneath stacks of bills. It was signed 6 months earlier by a neurologist he didn't know, Dr. Marco Silva from Barcelona. Confused, Luis opened it and felt his entire world tilt on its axis. The diagnosis was clear: mutismo selectivo temporal, a temporary condition, reversible, curable with tenderness, music, and emotional security. Exactly what Amina had given them. The final line hit him like a physical blow. Full recovery expected within 3 to 6 months with appropriate emotional care. His hands shaking uncontrollably, Luis called Dr. Silva. "Why didn't I see this report? Why didn't anyone tell me?" The doctor sighed wearily. "I sent everything to Dr. Mendez, exactly as she requested. She said she would deliver it to you personally." Luis felt the truth settle like poison in his veins. Alba hadn't just doubted Amina. She had deliberately hidden the truth, condemning his daughters to months of unnecessary suffering while he poured his fortune into futile treatments. He had been so blind, so easily manipulated. He had lashed out at the wrong woman. He had exiled the only person who had actually healed his children. The next morning, before doubt could weaken his resolve, Luis Herrera packed the twins into the car. Their small hands clutched their stuffed animals silently, their faces pale and hollow. He didn't tell anyone where they were going, especially not Alba. As he drove toward Barcelona, he made one final stop. He found Amina Clark in a modest room she was renting by the week, sitting on the edge of her bed, her backpack still half unpacked, as if she hadn't dared to settle anywhere. When she opened the door and saw Luis standing there, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and remorse, she stiffened, bracing herself for more accusations. But Luis's voice cracked the moment he spoke. "I was wrong, Amina, terribly wrong. And my daughters, they need you. Please, come with us." Amina froze, her mind reeling. She looked past him at the twins inside the car, their foreheads pressed against the window, watching her with the desperate hope of children waiting for sunrise. Her breath trembled, not from pride, not from fear, but from the stirring of a wound that finally felt seen, finally felt understood. She nodded, unable to speak. Together, they drove to Dr. Marco Silva's clinic, a place that smelled of eucalyptus and quiet hope. He examined the girls with gentle patience, watching how their fingers curled into Amina's skirt for safety, how their eyes followed her every move. When he finished, he turned to Luis with gentle certainty. "Your daughters were never lost, Mr. Herrera," he said. "They were grieving, and they began to heal the moment they felt safe with her." Amina covered her mouth, tears slipping between her fingers. Luis exhaled shakily, the weight of guilt and regret threatening to suffocate him. "So, everything Alba told me was wrong," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The doctor nodded sadly. "Trauma doesn't heal with machines, Mr. Herrera. It heals with presence, with warmth, with trust." Amina gave them what medicine couldn't. On the drive back to Madrid, the girls didn't speak, but they leaned against Amina, their small bodies finally relaxing. Luis watched them through the rearview mirror, guilt burning through his chest. He knew now that he had allowed the wrong person to guide his daughters' lives, and he had nearly lost them because of it. But he also knew something else, something fierce and absolute. He would not lose Amina again. When they returned to Madrid, Luis felt a momentary lightness, believing that the truth alone could fix what had been broken. But Dr. Alba Mendez had already moved, faster than guilt, faster than justice, faster than the truth itself. By the next morning, the headlines were splashed across every newspaper and news site. Disgraced nurse infiltrates billionaire's home, children at risk, former nurse accused of manipulation, negligence and lies, vulnerable twins. Amina's photo, taken as she left the mansion weeks earlier with her worn backpack, was plastered everywhere. Alba had used her influence masterfully, orchestrating a campaign of misinformation through carefully crafted interviews, calculated statements, and biased expert opinions. Within hours, the Child Protection Council issued a precautionary order. Amina was not allowed anywhere near the twins. Luis came home to find the girls trembling, refusing food and water, calling out for Amina in choked whispers that soon dissolved back into silence. He tried to comfort them, but they curled into themselves as if every sound in the house had been sucked away again. It was happening all over again. He was losing them, and this time he knew exactly who was to blame. Fueled by rage, regret, and a father's primal terror, Luis hired private investigators, forensic auditors, digital analysts. If Alba wanted a war, he would give her one, but with irrefutable evidence, not insidious lies. What they uncovered was monstrous. Dozens of falsified reports, patients misdiagnosed for profit, experimental therapies prescribed for cases that never needed them, funds routed through shell accounts, a multi-year medical fraud empire built on the suffering of vulnerable people. And worst of all, the truth about Amina's ruined career. The negligence case. The death that had destroyed her life. All fabricated to protect a senior doctor who had been truly responsible. Luis felt physically sick. He had believed Alba. He had thrown Amina to the wolves based on the word of a woman who had been weaponizing medicine for years. He brought everything, every document, every testimony, to the authorities. The media devoured the scandal. The courts moved swiftly. Alba was arrested, exposed, disgraced. 30 years in prison, her license permanently revoked, every stolen euro returned. But none of it mattered, not truly, not to Luis, not as much as standing at the door of his mansion weeks later, watching Amina step inside again, her eyes filled with uncertainty and lingering fear. Before Luis could speak, two voices rang out, clear and bright. "Amina!" Lucia and Marisol raced down the stairs, flinging themselves into her arms, sobbing, laughing, speaking in full sentences, their voices alive, warm, safe. Amina held them tightly, whispering into their hair, "I'm here, my loves. I'm not going anywhere." And Luis realized something with quiet, aching clarity. He could rebuild fortunes. He could rebuild reputations. But only one woman on earth had rebuilt his daughters' souls. And she had done it with nothing but love. From the moment Amina Clark returned, the house began to breathe again, as if the walls themselves exhaled a months-long grief. The twins clung to her, constantly terrified that if they blinked, she might vanish again. And Amina, still shaken, yet overflowing with tenderness, stayed beside them through every nightmare, every tremor, every quiet moment when words were too fragile to form. In the weeks that followed, Luis transformed the mansion from a mausoleum of failed treatments into a sanctuary of healing. Laughter threaded through the hallways again. Music drifted from the kitchen, where Amina hummed as she cooked, and the twins, now chatty, curious, and full of life, followed her like two morning sunbeams. But Luis knew he owed more than gratitude. He owed justice to his daughters, to Amina, and even to the countless unseen victims Alba had manipulated. So he created the Herrera Foundation, dedicated to protecting children from medical malpractice, funding proper trauma care, and exposing unethical practices in the healthcare system. And there was only one person he trusted to guide its heart. Amina, he said gently one afternoon as she bandaged a doll for the twins. I want you to be our clinical advisor. No one understands emotional healing the way you do. Amina froze, startled. Luis, I'm just trying to rebuild my life. I don't know if I'm. You saved my daughters, he said softly, his eyes filled with unwavering conviction. You gave them back their voices. Let me give you back yours. And slowly, hesitantly at first, Amina stepped into the role. Her compassion reshaped the Foundation's programs. Her insight guided every new initiative. She trained teams in empathy-based care, and families from across Spain sought her guidance. The twins often sat beside her during workshops, proud and beaming, their presence a testament to the power of healing. Years passed. Lucia and Marisol, once silent shadows, grew into bright, articulate young women. At 15, they walked on stage at a major Foundation event, the spotlight catching the confidence in their smiles. Cameras flashed. Hundreds watched. Lucia took the microphone first, her voice clear and strong. When I was 5, I lost my voice, she began. Doctors said it was gone forever, but they were wrong because someone believed in what medicine couldn't measure, love. Marisol leaned in, her smile mirroring her sister's. Amina didn't just help us speak, she added. She helped us heal. In the front row, Amina pressed trembling fingers to her lips as tears streamed down her cheeks, a silent testament to the journey they had all undertaken. Luis, sitting beside her, took her hand and whispered, You changed their fate, Amina. And in that moment, Amina realized something profound. She had not just rebuilt her life. She had become the voice that had once been taken from her, a voice that now echoed through thousands of others, including 2 remarkable young women who would carry her legacy forward. On the night of the twins' 18th birthday, the mansion, once a silent tomb, glowed with music, warm lights, and the laughter of friends, family, and dozens of children whose lives had been touched by the Herrera Foundation. Yet the most intimate moment came long after the guests had departed. In the quiet of the living room, Lucia, Marisol, Luis, and Amina sat together, the soft hum of the fireplace wrapping them in a comforting golden glow. The twins' eyes sparkled with the kind of peace they had once thought they would never feel again. Lucia leaned her head on Amina's shoulder, her voice soft with gratitude. You saved us, Amina, she whispered. Amina shook her head gently. You saved yourselves, my loves. I just reminded you where your voices were hiding. Marisol looked at her father, her eyes filled with love and respect. And you saved all of us, Daddy, by believing the truth, even when it hurt. Luis's throat tightened with emotion. For years, he had carried the crushing guilt of trusting the wrong person, of pushing Amina away, of watching his daughters fade into silence. But tonight, seeing them strong, joyful, unbroken, he felt forgiveness settle deep and warm in his chest. I didn't know how to be brave back then, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Amina touched his hand, her eyes filled with understanding. But you learned. Outside, The city lights blinked like scattered constellations, each one representing a life touched by what had started as one family's tragedy. The girls had grown into remarkable young women. Lucia, now a pediatrician in training, determined to heal children's bodies and minds. Marisol, studying child psychology, dedicated to understanding and nurturing the emotional well-being of young souls. Both were dedicating their futures to the very children whose pain they understood better than anyone. As the clock chimed midnight, Marisol sat up, a soft smile gracing her lips. "Do you think Mom would be proud?" she asked, her voice filled with a wistful longing. Luis swallowed hard, his heart aching with both sorrow and love. "She would be so proud of all of us, especially of the way you turned loss into love." Amina closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the moment settle around her, a blanket of peace and gratitude. She had once walked into this house as a stranger, with nothing but a worn backpack and a wounded past. Now she was family, not by blood, but by an unbreakable bond, forged in healing, strengthened by unwavering loyalty, and sustained by a love that knew how to piece broken fragments back together. And in that quiet room, Luis understood the profound truth he had been living for years. His greatest fortune wasn't his wealth, his power, or his influence. It was the voices he had once feared were lost forever. The voices that Amina had so lovingly brought back to life. Years later, the legacy of what had begun in that mansion continued to ripple far beyond anything Luis, Amina, or the twins could have ever imagined. The Herrera Foundation had grown into a nationwide network of clinics, community centers, emotional care programs, and scholarships that carried the promise of a second chance for countless children. And at the center of it all, like a heartbeat that refused to fade, stood the four people who had rebuilt each other's lives. One crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves swirled across the courtyard of the Foundation's newest center, Luis stood before a crowd gathered for the grand opening. Cameras flashed, children laughed, and volunteers hurried back and forth, their faces bright with purpose. But Luis's eyes were fixed on Amina, Lucia, and Marisol, standing together near the stage, their presence radiating strength, compassion, and unwavering hope. He took a slow, steadying breath before speaking, his voice thick with emotion. "There was a time," he began, his words echoing across the courtyard, "when this world felt unbearably silent, when grief took the voices of my daughters and nearly took mine." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, his heart filled with gratitude. "But someone walked into our lives carrying nothing but kindness, and she gave us everything." The crowd turned as one toward Amina, whose eyes filled instantly with tears, her face glowing with humble pride. Luis continued softly, his voice filled with reverence. "This center, this movement, none of it would exist without her courage, without her unwavering belief in the power of healing, and without the strength of my girls, who turned their pain into a calling, who transformed their own suffering into a source of hope for others." Lucia stepped forward, slipping her hand into Amina's, her voice steady and bright. "We learned that real healing doesn't begin in hospitals or laboratories," she said, her gaze sweeping over the crowd, her words filled with conviction. "It begins in the heart, with someone who sees you, stays with you, and believes in who you can become." Marisol added, her smile trembling with pride. "And now, it's our turn to be that someone for thousands of children, to offer them the same hope that was given to us." As applause rose around them, Amina looked at Luis, really looked at him, not as a man broken by guilt, but as the father who had fought for justice, who had rebuilt his daughter's futures, who had chosen truth over power. She whispered, her voice filled with awe, "You've come so far, Luis." Luis shook his head gently, his eyes filled with love and gratitude. "We did it together, Amina." And for a moment, time softened around them, erasing the years of pain and suffering, allowing them to bask in the warmth of the present moment. The tragedy that had once threatened to tear their lives apart had instead stitched them into a family, one built on forgiveness, courage, and a love stronger than any fear. As the ceremony ended, the twins wrapped their arms around Amina, their faces radiant with joy, and Luis placed a hand over all three of them, his heart overflowing with love. The silent mansion, the crushing loss, the unbearable pain. It all felt distant now, like a storm long past. Because standing there, surrounded by the very people they had vowed to protect, one truth was unmistakable. They had not merely survived their story. They had transformed it into a beacon of hope for thousands. And the voices once lost to grief now echoed across an entire nation. A testament to the enduring power of love, compassion, and the unwavering belief in the human spirit. The years unfolded gently, like pages turning in a beloved book, each chapter richer and more meaningful than the last. The Herrera Foundation kept growing, stretching its hands toward forgotten cities, reaching children who had never known what emotional safety felt like, offering them a haven of healing and a chance to rewrite their own stories. And through it all, the bond between Luis, Amina, Lucia, and Marisol only deepened, no longer stitched together by shared tragedy, but woven by conscious choice, by unwavering gratitude, and by a love that had learned how to stay, no matter what challenges life threw their way. One quiet winter evening, long after the last appointment at the Foundation's main center, Amina walked through the halls alone, her heart filled with a quiet sense of peace. Her fingertips brushed the murals painted by children, little sons, little hearts, little hands reaching up toward skies they had once feared. She paused before a drawing she knew well. Two small girls holding hands with a woman with dark curls, their faces radiating pure joy. Above them, in childish handwriting, were the words, "Gracias, Amina. We love you." "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Luis asked softly from behind her, his voice filled with a quiet wonder. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame, his gaze filled with warmth and affection. He was older now, his hair streaked with silver, but his eyes held a gentle kindness, and his face was etched with the wisdom of experience. He was softer, too, Amina thought, no longer carrying guilt like armor, but radiating a quiet strength, the strength of a man who had faced his demons and emerged victorious. He walked toward her, slowly, deliberately, stopping beside her as they both looked at the picture, their shoulders brushing gently. "I think about it every day, Luis," Amina replied, her voice filled with sincerity. "There was a time when I didn't know if I belonged anywhere, if I could ever truly heal from the pain of my past. Now, I can't imagine belonging anywhere else, or being anything other than what I am." Luis exhaled softly, his voice warm with truth. "You didn't just heal my daughters, Amina. You healed this home, you healed this family, you healed this community. And," he added, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "you healed me." Before she could respond, laughter drifted toward them from down the hall, the joyful sound of Lucia and Marisol approaching, their steps light and quick. Now young women with purpose in their steps and kindness etched into their smiles. They were the embodiment of hope, the living testament to the power of healing and the enduring strength of the human spirit. "Come on," Marisol said, looping her arm through Amina's, her eyes sparkling with mischief. She looped her arm through Amina's, a gesture of solidarity and affection. "We're having dinner together tonight. Absolutely no excuses accepted," Lucia declared, a playful grin dancing on her lips. "You know how your family is. They won't let you wander around alone for even a moment." Amina laughed, a sound that still occasionally surprised her, a melody discovered deep within her own chest. It was a sound of healing, of liberation. As they stepped out of the building, the winter air embraced them. A crisp, cold welcome that spoke of both the season and the fresh start they had all embraced. For far too many years, Amina had carried the crushing weight of a past shattered by deceit and betrayal. Now, she carried something entirely different. A profound certainty that her life had meaning, a real, tangible, and vibrant meaning that pulsed within her. Luis, standing in the doorway, secured the locks behind them. His gaze lingering on the three women he loved more than life itself as they ventured into the night together. A warmth spread through him, filling a void he had long believed would remain empty forever. They had built something extraordinary, something that transcended mere foundations or simple programs and clinics. They had crafted a legacy of healing, a beacon of hope born from the silence of trauma, rebuilt with unwavering courage, and carried forward by voices that would never again be silenced. Snow fell softly that evening as Lucia and Marisol returned home, their faces radiant with news that would bring a sense of completion to a journey nearly 2 decades in the making. The fireplace crackled merrily, casting a warm, amber glow across the living room where Luis and Amina sat side by side, their hands intertwined. 2 lives forever and irrevocably altered by a single act of compassion, an act that had blossomed into this very moment. Lucia stepped forward, her voice steady despite the undercurrent of emotion that shimmered within it. "Papa Amina," she began, "we've both been offered positions at the newest center. They want us to lead the pediatric trauma and child psychology teams." Marisol added, her eyes glistening with a mixture of joy and anticipation. "We're ready. We want to help children the way we were helped, to offer them the same sanctuary and support." For a long moment, Luis could only stare, speechless, his heart overflowing with a love and pride he could barely contain. 2 little girls who had once been unable to utter a single word, trapped within the confines of their trauma, now stood before him as strong, compassionate women, ready to heal others. They had transformed their own suffering into a powerful sense of purpose. They were women shaped not by the silence of their past, but by the boundless love that had nurtured them. Amina's breath caught in her throat as she pulled them both into a tight embrace, tears welling in her eyes. "You're everything you were meant to become," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would be so incredibly proud." Luis joined the embrace, wrapping his arms around all 3 of them, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he felt the weight of the past lift completely, dissolving into the ether. What had once been a home filled with loss and despair had been transformed into a sanctuary of resilience and hope. What had once been a place of unimaginable pain had blossomed into a lasting legacy of healing and compassion. They had not only healed themselves, they had undergone a profound transformation, emerging stronger and more determined than ever before. Sometimes, the most profound miracles don't arise from vast wealth, specialized expertise, or lofty status. They emerge from simple presence, genuine empathy, and the unwavering courage to show up for someone when their world is crumbling around them. One person's act of love and unwavering support can rewrite an entire lifetime of pain, paving the way for healing and hope. Has someone ever changed your life simply by being there for you, offering a hand to hold in the darkness? Or have you ever been that person for someone else, a beacon of light in their darkest hour? Share your story below. I read every message. And if this journey has touched your heart, please hit like, comment, and subscribe so that more people can discover these stories that heal, uplift, and remind us of what truly matters: the power of human connection and the enduring strength of the human spirit.